I have a mental illness.
Imagine someone just said that to you. What's the first thing that comes into your mind? Is it that she's unhealthy? She's crazy? Or is it what's wrong with her? Or, most commonly, I don't really know what to say. This is kind of awkward. Can I just go now?
You see, this is why talking about mental illness can be a terrifying thing to do. We fear the judgment and the stigma that society has placed around the topic of mental illness. But what is a mental illness? Let's look at depression as an example. Scientifically, people with depression, their brains work differently. They have a lower concentration of neurotransmitters, which means that they're less able to regulate their moods. But each person's definition of depression is different. Some people describe it as a feeling of turning in against yourself. For other people, it's a sense of underlying sadness that seems always present no matter what they're doing. But no matter what, each definition is different, and each experience of a person going through depression is different as well. Today we're going to talk about one experience of going through it, and also what it's like to have your friends going through it.
We'd like to make it clear that we're not here today to tell you how exactly to diagnose depression or how to combat it. Because in reality, there's no exact steps to follow, exact numbers of pills or therapy sessions you should do, since it is different for everyone. We're here today because we've observed that even in a relatively liberal or open-minded community like TAS, depression is still a topic that people tend to avoid to discuss in public. So we look into possible reasons. Could it be that depression is not a prevalent problem? No. In fact, research has shown that 12.5%, or 1 out of 8 people on average experience depression. If this number doesn't seem like a lot to you, imagine in a room like this. Around the 2 first rows of this portion will have experienced depression at some point in their life. If depression is a prevalent problem, how come people still tend to avoid to talk about it? We realize that it is because that depression is such a stigmatized problem that people become afraid to talk about it. Because when it comes to depression, unlike other illnesses, the person becomes the problem to blame. So let's say if Annabel catches a cold today. We said that the virus is what causes Annabel's discomfort. Whereas if I tell you I have mental illness, because we don't have concrete things like virus or bacteria to blame on, I myself becomes the problem. It is because of this mindset that over time it becomes fearful, or sometimes even shameful to talk about the problems. But it really shouldn't be. Having depression doesn't mean you're weaker in any other way. It simply means that you're looking at things from a different light. Just like how, as a math class, we look at the same problem set, but we come up with different approaches to it. People who are going through depression simply look at things from a different perspective. So now we have briefly introduced what depression is. We're going to talk about it from different perspectives. From the inside as first person, and from the outside as third person. Then we'll wrap today's talk up by connecting to the theme, Ctrl+Alt+Delete, the power we all hold to make a difference. We'd like to make it clear that this talk might mean completely different things to you, based on our exposure to this topic. Perhaps you're someone who has no idea what depression looks like. What we're going to say might seem all too dramatic, all too emotional for you. Perhaps you're someone who knows someone else that is going through depression. What we're going to say might ring a bell for you. We hope that we can give you tips on how to act based on our own experience. Perhaps you're someone who is going through hard times. We want to let you know that you're not alone, and that you should not feel afraid or be ashamed for reaching out for help. You don't deserve to be broken, because no matter how you think of yourself, no one ever deserves to be broken.
I've always been happy. Well, I've always been considered as being happy. And it was only last year when I first realized that the person I was pretending to be on the outside and the person I was on the inside, they were not the same person. But I thought that it was normal. I thought it was normal to go home and have these overwhelming feelings of sadness and irritation. And worst of all, I thought it was fine because in the long run, did my mental health really matter? All I thought that mattered was getting into a good college. But once I opened up to friends, family, and teachers and counselors, I realized that it is possible to have both college and mental health. You can find a safe balance in between the two, and you can have both choices. But that was my mistake. I chose college over mental health, and as a result, I kept everything inside. I didn't open up to anyone, and this crack between the person I was pretending to be and the person that I thought I was slowly started widening, and soon I couldn't control it anymore. It was affecting my life in academics, with family, and with friends. And there was a period when I felt completely alone and helpless and in despair. And that was my second mistake. If I had opened up to people earlier, I would have had a support system to rely on when I was going through such tough times. But the hardest thing for someone who feels they're going through hard times is this fear of opening up. It's so hard to overcome this fear and overcome the fear of people treating you differently, people pitying you, people being afraid to talk to you. But in fact, it's really important not to let that fear stop you, because all of us, every single one of us, deserves help. We need help sometimes, and that's okay. In fact, asking for help can be a sign of strength. Otherwise, you'll fall into what we call the cycle of loneliness. The cycle of loneliness is when you feel sad or down or depressed, and then you isolate yourself. You don't hang out with friends. You don't ask friends to hang out. And then when you see, perhaps on a Snapchat story, people hanging out without you, you get a major case of FOMO, or fear of missing out. And then you feel even worse. And this starts the cycle again and again. And you basically get stuck in there. But it takes the first step of not isolating yourself, reaching out to a friend to ask them to hang out, or just taking someone up on an opportunity to hang out after school. But that can be really hard to do. And sometimes you just fall back into it. So the important thing to do is to validate your feelings, to realize that it's okay to not be okay, to have self-compassion. And oftentimes, our thoughts control how we feel, but we can't control our thoughts. How many of you have ever been at a store, let's say Forever 21, and you see a really nice dress, maybe a really nice suit, but it's really expensive, but you're thinking, that would look pretty good on me, but there's no way I can afford it. Has a thought ever popped into your head that maybe I could just slide it into my bag and walk out of the store? Well, that's called an intrusive thought. It's a thought that just pops into your head. And it doesn't mean that you're a shoplifter, unless you actually put it in your bag and walk out of the store. But it's important to realize that these thoughts we can't control. They just pop into our heads. But what we can do is control the next thought that we bring into our heads afterwards. A common intrusive thought for someone with depression is, I don't have any friends. I'm so alone. But what you should do is take a second and think, well, is that really true? And in most cases, you'll find the answer is no. You have people around you who care about you. Another hard thing to do is to not take out your emotions on other people. It's natural for us to get mad at friends, and it's okay to do so. But it's important to realize how you're acting and the effect of your actions upon others. For example, let's take a look at a conversation that Fiona and I had one day when I was feeling particularly down. So it was a normal Wednesday afternoon, and I was texting Fiona, hey Fee, you want to hang out this Friday?
Ding ding. Nah, sorry. I gotta hang out with Skylar this Friday.
You know, if you didn't want to hang out with me, you could just say so.
Stop overreacting, just chill a bit.
Don't tell me to chill, you don't even understand me. Oh my god, she didn't reply to my message. She must not want to be my friend. You see, that's a crazy thought, right? And probably some of you are probably thinking, that's kind of weird, that's pretty out there. But in fact, it's a pretty common response, right, Dee?
That's very true.
It's something, well, in fact, this is a true story. But it's important in that situation to not do what I did. What I did when I saw that she didn't respond to my text was I felt horrible. I took it personally. I jumped to conclusions. And I thought that she didn't want to be my friend. But in fact, what I should do is think, I feel incredibly hurt right now because she didn't respond to my text. But oftentimes, I don't respond to other people's texts. And also, she probably made plans with that person before I asked her to hang out. So it's natural for her to say that she already had plans. And it's natural for her to not reply, because I was acting pretty irrationally. So being self-compassionate and realizing that it's okay to feel this way, and it's okay to be hurt, but also to think about things from other people's perspectives. That's the most important thing that you can do. And it's the first step to getting out of these traps of depression and to leading a more mentally stable lifestyle. So being aware of your feelings and having self-compassion is the most important thing that you can do in these types of situations.
I have 4 close friends of mine who went through depression last year, and these cases varied in severity. As a friend, they came to talk about their problems. I suddenly realized that there are choices I have to make. Admittedly, throughout the process, I also made mistakes that I regret making. One of the first choices I had to make was that I wasn't sure if I should get outside interference to help my friend. As a friend they trusted to talk about their problems, it suddenly became a tug of war between losing my friend's trust versus perhaps risking my friend's life. I've learned to evaluate each case based on several factors. First, how severe is the case? Is this person self-harming? If yes, is it life-threatening? And how long has this been going on? Second, how public is this case? Keep in mind that because TAS is such a close family, that once you start telling people, things might spread like wildfire. Our don't tell someone else usually only acts as something that slows down the spread of rumors, but not completely deterring the spread. The key is that if you feel the need to report to counselors, always tell your friends that you're reporting. Or even better, give them the chance to talk to counselors and adults first. I too faced a situation in which I really had to reveal names to counselors. That was perhaps one of the hardest decisions I've ever made in my life. And I was scared to death, quite literally, when I had to tell my friend that I told her name to the faculties. But I realized that, as cliche as it sounds, communication is the key. Tell your friend how you're feeling, tell them the situation, tell them why you feel the need to report, and I'm sure that they will understand. Another choice I had to make was that I wasn't sure if I should share my thought with my friend. It's very tempting to just take their side. After all, you want your friend to be happy. So when your friend comes to you with relationships, friendships, or family issues, it's really tempting to just take their side, despite you having different opinions on what that person should do. I, however, have learned that it's so much better to be honest with how you feel. After all, people who are going through depression, they don't want your sympathy. They want someone who is willing to listen to them and understand them. We as listeners do hold a lot of power over our wording, though. For example, instead of saying, "Hey, Annabel, I think we're totally overreacting just now," you can say things like, "I understand why you're feeling this way, but I can also see why she doesn't want to respond to your text that very moment." Do you see the difference there? If you want to propose a possible solution, you can say things like, "Perhaps you can try." The key is to don't sound too condescending or act like you know everything, because there's no way we can be 100% in other person's shoes. One of the biggest mistakes I made was that I didn't realize the impact it had on me as a listener. Oftentimes, helping out a friend can be very emotionally draining. Imagine going home after a long day in school. So you open up your laptop thinking, okay, finally it's time to start my website. But instead, you see 4 chat boxes popping up. It's your friend telling you how bad their day is, how much they hate their life, and how they want to hurt themselves. I did not understand the emotional burden this had come with me. And this is very dangerous, because as I faced difficulties later on, it was really easy to fall into their mindset. It's important to keep in mind that there's a fine balance between caring about your friend and caring about yourself. If you feel like there's a constant negative effect it has on you, then it's okay to reach out for help from someone else. Another mistake I made was that I blamed a lot of things on myself. However, I learned that you can't help the people who don't want to be helped. Ultimately, it's up to them to decide whether or not he or she wants to take in your advice. This doesn't mean that you should just ditch your friend and leave them alone, but this means that if anything happens, you shouldn't just blame everything on yourself. It's easy for our community to kind of lean back and say, well, I don't know who's going through depression, so there's not much I can do, right? That's certainly not true. Honestly, I'd say TS is a pretty close-knit family. We're all pretty nice to each other, although there's little cliques here and there. But I think it's safe to say that we're all really nice to each other, and we're a big family. The problem with one big family, however, is that there's always people who are left behind. You might not leave them behind intentionally, but for those who don't fit into this particular TAS culture, they might easily feel left out, different, and perhaps lonely. It is then our community's responsibility to not make the jokes we sometimes make. Perhaps to mock someone's particular accent, clothing style, sexuality, or political belief. We don't know the clear line of what that person is comfortable and what that person is not. So we need to be more careful with what we joke about usually. It is also our responsibility to not treat that person any differently than they are. If this helps, try to approach as if people who are going through depression actually have allergy. I know this sounds like a very absurd analogy now, but if you think about it, it actually makes sense. If your friend has allergy, you won't treat them any differently. You won't look down upon them. But you still check in on their day. You will see how they're doing. And you won't just run across the block and pull all your friends and say, hey, have you heard that Fiona has allergies? You don't do that. If someone else is going through hard times, let that person decide when he or she is comfortable with sharing with everyone else. We, as outsiders, have absolutely no right to take that away from them.
When you press Ctrl+Alt+Delete on your computer, you have the opportunity to either shut it down, restart, or sleep. Similarly, being aware of the power that you have to change your thoughts and your feelings gives you the choice to press Ctrl+Alt+Delete on your own life. If you're someone going through depression, you can choose to shut down and completely lose faith in yourself. Or you can choose to restart and give yourself the opportunity to change and get on the path to recovery.
If you know someone else who is going through a hard time, you can shut down by completely ignoring this person. Sleep by occasionally checking in, but not really treating it seriously. Or be caring and not judging, and give your friend a chance to restart.
I have a mental illness.
And it's okay to talk about it.
Thank you.